Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. Happy Father's Day. Oh, no fathers in the house. No, okay, all right, fine. Happy Father's Day. I'm excited about this morning, as ever, when we gather together and when we learn together and grow together. And my hope is that we would engage with our Heavenly Father today. And those of you who are exploring and wondering who on earth God is, and those of you who have been walking with God for many years, might actually today deepen your relationship with your Heavenly Father. I've been pondering our relationship with God as our Father this week, and I've been having a few thoughts as I go, just as I move around the house and everything, and I have decided that I think our relationship with God is far more like a dishwasher than a washing machine. Are you with me? No, thanks very much. Like a dishwasher, why? So when you do the washing, which, you gather up your washing and for us, we carry it down the stairs and down we go. We put all the washing in the washing machine. You shut the door, you set the thing going, and off goes the washing machine. And then at that moment, every single time, you turn around and there is one lone sock that has dropped out of the pile that is on the kitchen floor, isn't there? So you go over to get the sock and you think, I'll get this in, I've got to get this clean, got to get this made ready for whatever I've got next happening. And you try and open the washing machine and it's like, no way, I'm sorry, I'm not opening for you. And you're like, oh no, the whole thing, I missed it. And now the socks are apart, so we're bound to lose the socks. And there's always a load of single socks that you can't connect with your other socks. I don't know where they go, but sock heaven, maybe, I don't know. But basically, it's a nightmare, isn't it? Not so with the dishwasher. When you set the dishwasher going and then you turn around and there's one stray spoon or a glass on the table and you think, oh no, missed putting that in. You go over, you take it, you open the dishwasher, which compliantly and forgivingly lets you do it. It even stops everything, almost as if to say, that's fine. If you forgot something, we just put that in now. I can wait for you. It's no problem. And you take it, put it back in, you shut the door, and it just carries on from where it was. Our relationship with God is more like the dishwasher than the washing machine. It's true. This morning, if you're anything like me, I often think, I've got it sorted. I'm going to be made ready. I'm being washed clean, and I'm being made ready for the purpose that God has made me for, and I can, be warmed by Him, and off I go. And then I realize actually there are things I need to attend to. There's something I've forgotten. There's something that's just been missed out. And I thought I had it all sorted, and I was walking with God, and then I realized, oh, maybe there's this thing I need to add in. And in God's heart, as a father towards us, is always like, yeah, come in, bring more to me. I want a relationship with you. And I've got grace for you and forgiveness for you. And if you forgot to put something in, to be made new, to be renewed, something in your mind, something in the way that you do life, whatever it is, that's fine. Just let's put it in. I can deal with it. I can cope. And as a father who loves his children, he wants to engage with us in that way this morning. And so I hope, as we look at our passage from Philippians this morning, that it will be just that. For each and every single one of us, wherever we're at in our understanding of our relationship with God the Father, that this morning it may be like we are received by him, that we are made ready for the purposes he has us for in our lives. So let's turn to our verses this morning, and we've been working our way through Philippians over the last few weeks, and if you've missed out, do just jump online at htb.org. All the talks are there, and you can catch up, and you can do the whole series through Philippians like a study. And here we are in Philippians chapter 2, verse 19, and I'm going to read that to us. It's going to be on the screen and in the Bibles in front of you or on your device. So Philippians 2, verse 19. I hope, Paul writes, in the Lord Jesus, to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. I have no one else like him, who takes a genuine interest in your welfare, for all are looking out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served me in the work of the gospel. I hope, therefore, to send him as soon as I see how things go with me. And I'm confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. But I think it's necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus. Turn to the person next to you and say, Epaphroditus. It's a good name, right? I think it necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, fellow worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs. For he longs for all of you and is distressed because you heard he was ill. Indeed, he was ill and almost died. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but also on me, to spare me sorrow upon sorrow. Therefore, I am all the more eager to send him, so that when you see him again, you may be glad and I may have less anxiety. So then, welcome him in the Lord with great joy and honor people like him. Because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help you could not give me. So there we have it. We are getting a slight window here. And some of you might be thinking, oh, what about like last week? You know, the passage before is this beautiful poetic explanation of who Jesus is and what he's done. And, we could do a whole sermon series just on the chapter last week. And then we're looking at these verses and thinking, well, this is just Paul making a few comments about his mates. Just kind of telling them a bit about Timothy and a bit about Epaphroditus. Crazy name. Sorry if you're called Epaphroditus this morning. So what on earth can we get out of this morning? Well, I want to even suggest to you that hidden and laced within these verses are the very purposes of your life. For every single one of us, that we can discover God's purpose for your life. That you'd walk out of this place this morning understanding the purpose God has given you, so that you might walk into the fullness of all that he has for you. So are you ready for that? Okay, here we go. I'm glad that you're ready for it. A number of years ago, I watched a great film called The Mask of Zorro, and I really enjoyed it. I've got vivid imagination. So by the end of the film, I imagined that I was Zorro, who was this kind of cool Spanish swordsman who would always save the day, black mask. No one really knew who he was, but he always turned up at the perfect moment and delivered everyone and saved everyone. He was like a superhero. And I sort of watched this film and I thought, I want to be a superhero. I want to be like someone like Zorro. And I even phoned my mum up. I was 21 at the time. Yes, 21. I phoned my mum up, who's brilliant at sewing. She makes wedding dresses and all sorts. That's not a plug, by the way. But she makes wedding dresses. And I phoned her up and I said, Mum, can you make me a superhero's outfit? Because I want to be a superhero. And she's like, sorry? You are 21. And I was like, no, seriously, Mum. And at the time, I was living in Exmouth, which is like a lovely little kind of a very small town on the south coast. And, small enough to make a big difference if you do something unusual. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna dress up like a superhero and I'm going to appear in the streets of Exmouth and do some wondrous act. And then in the newspaper, the Exmouth Herald, that glorious publication, there will be a headline that says, superhero appears in Exmouth. And then, people will come from far and wide to see if they can discover and work out who this superhero is. That was my plan, genuinely. This is not a fleeting moment. This was like a few weeks in the making. And I sort of thought, and I went out and I studied the streets of Exmouth and I thought, what do people really need? What could I do? And it dawned on me that I don't have a real superpower. So I'd have to do something that would be helpful to somebody, that they would be surprised that I was just on hand to do it. And then I'd disappear and they'd think, oh, who was that person? And the only thing I could discover or realize at the time was, I looked around Exmouth and there were lots of people who would stand out on the street outside a bar or a shop having a cigarette or asking somebody, have you got a light, mate? Have you got a light? If anyone ever asked you that, have you got a light, mate? And everyone always goes, oh, no, sorry, and that's it. So I thought I could appear at the right moment and light their cigarette and then disappear and they'll think, oh, who was that person? And then I had a crisis of conscience, and I thought, I love the smoking community, of course. But then I thought, I don't know if I want to be synonymous and become like Lighter Man or something. It's not quite what I had in mind. It's not quite Zorro enough. And so I then kind of hit the problem of the fact that I couldn't work out a superpower and that my mum refused to make me an outfit, which is, still hurts to this day. And it never happened. And I wonder if you had a superpower, what would it be? What would you choose? Would you fly like Superman? Or would there be something else that you could make happen? And some of you're being much more noble than me with Lighter Man. And you're thinking, if I had a superpower, I would, sort of deal with the world's poorest people. I would solve the issue of poverty or something. That would be an amazing superpower, wouldn't it? That's far more noble than what I was trying to do in Exmouth. If we had a superpower, what would it be? But for me, I think as I kind of go deeper into the layers of psychology and think, well, why did I want to be a superhero? What was that all about? There's something in it about relationship. I want to be connected with people. I wanted to connect with the people around me. And I think somewhere along the way I was thinking, actually, if I can connect with a load of people and then I become known as a superhero, then they will come to me and I don't have to go to them anymore. And then I can meet everyone in the whole world. And there's something like, as I grew up, I always thought, I want to meet everyone. People are fascinating, aren't they? People are intriguing. I sit on the tube and I look around and I think, all these lives of different people going in different directions. Where were they this morning? Where are they going tonight? I want to meet everyone. And although that's quite an extreme desire for relationship, in all of us, there's this level of desire for connection. We want to be connected. We want relationship. When we encounter a relationship that matters, it makes a difference. It changes us, it changes other people. Relationship is core. And Paul knew that it's all about relationship. And in our passage today, we get a window into some of Paul's relationships. A couple of key relationships with Timothy and with this person, Epaphroditus. And although it's just Paul talking about his mates, it gives us an insight into how Paul did life. Paul knew it was all about relationship. And if you begin to look at the life of Paul, you begin to realize that yes, he did extraordinary things like planting lots of churches. He survived shipwrecks. He got beaten. He got imprisoned, but he kept going. How did he do it? How did he do all that he did? How did he become the pioneer, the forerunner, somebody who was able to stand in great pressure? How did Paul manage it? How could I manage it? And as you just look at passages like this that litter the New Testament in Paul's writing, you realize that he had deep, meaningful relationships everywhere he went. He was engaged in authentic relationship because he knew it was all about relationship. The depth of his relationships increased his resilience to do all that he managed to do. And he knew it was all about relationship. At one level, he knew it was about relationship with God. So here we have the relationship with God. God and us. Paul knew we've got to get connected to God because he's the very source of relationship. He's the source of love. You know, this whole story, this whole Bible is all about the story of relationship. It's all about relationship. Right from the very beginning, it's about God in relationship with himself as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, expressing creatively as only he could to create and develop and draw people into relationship. And so he instigates relationship in and of himself, and he expresses it with people, and they enter relationship, and then that relationship gets broken. And people encounter a broken relationship with God because they choose to opt out of that relationship, to walk away from that relationship. And that doesn't just impact their relationship with God, it impacts their relationship with the whole of creation around them, other people and creation, the earth. All relationship is impacted in that time. You can read about it at the beginning of Genesis, and the story continues throughout the whole narrative of Scripture. And so the rest of the story unfolds as God says, I want to establish relationship with you. It's about being in relationship. It's all about relationship. And he calls the people to himself, not just so they can selfishly hold a relationship with him, but so they can demonstrate that relationship to everyone around them. It's all about relationship. And so he sends his son as a validation and say, look, this is my son. He'll show you how to do relationship with me. And what's more, he will enable relationship with me, a relationship that you have to have. And Paul encounters that relationship as he meets with Jesus Christ and enters relationship with God. That's where relationship begins. True relationship begins with God. But even Paul knows, actually, that's not where it ends. Shock horror. You may have come here this morning thinking, I'm in church because I want to grow my relationship with God. And if that's where it ends for you, I want to controversially say, it's not going to happen. If that's where it ends for you, I just want to develop my relationship with God. It's about me and God, about me and God. Actually, there's something far deeper that Paul begins to point to. Because this relationship isn't just about God and us, the whole fabric of relationships as we grow as a society. It's about others as well. It's the people around us. As we get rooted in a relationship with God, he calls us into relationship with others. He calls us into relationship, deep, authentic relationship with others. He tells us we can't go it alone. We can't stick with individualism. Much as our culture and society wants us to be individuals, wants to put that upon us, God says, no, you can't do it alone. You have to be in relationship with others. You see, the strength of this relationship here between you and God is demonstrated by the strength of relationship here with others. Did you know that? It's quite a sobering thought. The strength of your relationship with God will be influenced and demonstrated by the strength of relationship with others. The brightest demonstration of God at work in our world is not our clever arguments or funny stories, but it's living a life expressing the deep love received from and inspired by God. And we see that in the relationships around us. The greatest proof that God is at work in your heart here today is the constant demonstration of love towards the people around you. And that's quite a challenge, isn't it? The greatest demonstration, the proof that God is at work in your heart. It is not proved in isolation, just like you have some amazing relationship with God, but you don't care about other people. God says it can't work like that. The greatest demonstration and proof of his work in your life is demonstrated through the relationships that you have around you. John starts talking about it. In 1 John, he even goes as far as saying this. He says, you cannot hate somebody else and love God. If you hate somebody, you hate God. That's massive. Particularly for some of us, if we've got relationships where there's strain or struggle, or we struggle to forgive. And Matthew goes even further and says, do you know what? If you can't live with forgiveness towards other people, you're not going to walk into the fullness of relationship God has for you, which he has purposed for you. The whole thing, it's all about relationship. And if you want relationship with God, you have to have relationship with others. These two things cannot be separated. That's why some of the atrocities, the tragedies that we've seen unfold this week, with the shootings in Orlando, or there's just the tragic circumstances around Joe Cox's death, they're nothing to do with God. Because God is love, and he's about relationship and connection. And where there is hate, that is not God. God is love. Those things cannot be and will not be validated by anything in the heart of God. For God is about relationship and connection. He's about you expressing your relationship with him to those around you. And if your relationship with him is defined by love, so will your relationships around you be defined by love. It's the greatest proof that he's at work in your life. So what can we begin to learn about relationship then? We need to learn this stuff. This is a great idea, and it's a great challenge to us to be thinking about the relationships in our lives. How many authentic relationships do you have? How strong are the relationships in your lives? And do they point to the reality of the relationship you have with God? But Paul, in this passage, can teach us a few things. He does authentic relationship in a masterful way, and we can learn from him this morning. So what does it look like for him? What are the values, the principles, the practical things that Paul would put in place to develop relationship? And as we learn from them, my hope is that all of us might step into greater and more authentic relationship in our lives. So what are they? Well, here's the first thing. If we're going to develop relationship, we have to invest. We have to make a choice to invest. And Paul always chose to invest. He often started with the very person in front of him. Here we find him talking about Timothy. And Timothy was a young man who he meets in Acts chapter 16. He didn't meet him in Acts chapter 16, but that's where we find him in the Bible. And he has this meeting with a young man who has turned to Jesus, who has said, you know what, I think Jesus is the Son of God. And Paul grabs him at that moment and says, this passionate young man, why don't you come with me? Why don't you come on the journey with me? He makes a choice to invest. It's not like, oh, that's great for Timothy. You get on with it. I'll get on with my walk with God. No, he's like, my walk with God is expressed in my investment with you as well. So come with me on the journey. And so Paul takes Timothy on the journey. He takes others, Epaphroditus, Barnabas, different people at different times. Mark, he takes different people on journeys with him, on the adventure with him, because his decision is to absolutely invest for him, particularly in the next generation. That was a choice. But that for us could be investment in the person sitting right next to you now. The person sitting in front of you who don't even know their name yet. You could choose, I want to just invest in you. It could be in a little way or in a big way. It's an invitation to join you in the adventure of faith. Where are you investing? Who are you investing with? I have this bunch of keys, which looks, it looks kind of mildly impressive, like I'm sort of some prison guard or something, I think, doesn't it? There's lots of keys on there, but, partly because of my disorganization, I've always got keys on my key ring that I have no idea what they do. Does anyone else have a key on your key ring? You've got no idea. Come on, hands, please. A few of you. I think the rest of you might be lying. We'll be checking later. No, I'm joking. It's all right. So I always have. So, there's different keys in here. So, for example, this one. I have no idea what this key does. I have no idea. And, of course, we keep keys, don't we? Because we're slightly nervous that one day we're going to find that lock that this key does. And either we can't get out of the room because we threw the key away, or it's the box that we hid £10,000 in. So it's like, oh, that's why I had that key. Oh, fantastic. Here it is. Of course, in reality, it's usually because it's a house we no longer live in anymore, and we just kept the key, which we shouldn't have done. Or it's something that has been thrown away a long time ago, but we can't bring ourselves to separate ourselves from that key just in case we find the lock somewhere. So we keep it. Well, I have a name for those keys, and you can name them today as well. It's a practical thing. It's a helpful thing. I call these keys my Timothy keys. And I use them. I use my keys on a daily basis. I often look at the bunch of keys, and when I see a key like this key, I think, oh, my Timothy key. And it reminds me, it provokes me, it tells me, whose life are you unlocking? Whose life are you investing in? So much so that you're unlocking something for them. Who are you opening doors for? Who are you investing in? And it provokes me to make a daily choice that I might invest in the people around me. You have a practical opportunity. You were told about it today in the service. We have Focus coming up, which will just be a staggering week. And one of the brilliant, most exceptional opportunities you have is to say, do you know what, I'm going to get involved with Focus Kids or youth. And I could just go along and kind of passively be part of it and watch in on this wonderful week, and then we'll all have a wonderful time and a few barbecues. Or I can do that as well as making a decision to invest in somebody else's life. My Timothy key. And I can say, do you know what, I'm going to actually do that. And I guarantee you, if you choose to do that, you will be fuller as a result, because you'll be engaging, you'll be choosing to invest in relationship. You'll be passing the baton on. You'll be calling the best out of somebody else. You'll be investing. Can you imagine as a church if we all made a decision to invest in the people around us? If we all made a decision, you know what, I'm not going to just keep all this good stuff for me when I learn a load of things. I'm going to make sure that I have channels within which I'm encouraging other people. I'm praying for other people. I'm cheering them on. Whether that's just a heartfelt welcome on a weekly basis, or whether that's a meeting up for a coffee, whether that's an inclusion into your Connect group, or a dinner that you could throw, or an extra piece of lunch that you can invite someone back to, whatever it is, you choose to invest in those around you. The second thing that Paul begins to show us in this thing is all around the area of interests. Have a look again at verse 22. It says this, verse 21. For everyone looks out for his own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. Not those of Jesus Christ. That's true, isn't it? But actually, in our culture, there's a sense in which, look out for you. Number one first, make sure you're okay. If you're okay, then probably everyone else will be all right. That's what we learn to understand. Advertising aims at that. It's all about you being made better. It's all about you. It's you, it's you. If you're all right, everyone else will probably be all right. Paul flips that on its head. He says, don't live in that kind of culture. Live in the culture that says, you know what, it's not about that. I'm going to choose to have my interest in other people. It's them first, not me. I don't want to live some selfish existence that makes sure number one is okay, and if I've got anything left over, the others might benefit. But actually to say, do you know what? I'm going to spend myself for the sake of someone else. I'm going to invest in their life, and I will trust that in that place, God will bless me and enable me and help me to get through. Do you know what? When I've sought to live like that, that's exactly what's happened. That would be my story. That would be my testimony. That actually in the moments in my life where I've been more interested in investing in somebody else, God has sought to provide for me. I've been looked out for. I remember an overwhelming emotion that happened to me when I was just got married. I married Sarah nearly 9 years ago now, and the most gorgeous, beautiful, incredible wife. And I was amazed. It was a brilliant day, and we went away for our honeymoon, and we came back and just got back into normal life again, working out who does the washing, who loads the dishwasher, etc. And we're just getting back in. And I remember a few days after we got back, I can remember exactly where I was sitting. You know, there's moments in life where something is overwhelming and you remember it, absolutely remember it. I remember exactly where I was sitting and had this overwhelming emotion of relief and freedom. And the reason for it was this, that actually I knew that there was somebody who was intent on my interests, who loved me and wanted my interests before their own. And deep in my heart, her interests were more important than mine. And suddenly, in my thinking, there was an outward looking of saying, do you know what? Somebody else's interest is more important than mine. And how staggering is this, that there's someone who's got my interests at their heart. And if she's got my interest, I don't need to have my own interests at heart anymore. I'm free from just trying to fight to get through every day and look after number one. I'm free to start caring about somebody else. I can get above the kind of trying to get through every day of life, and I can put my head above all of that and say, do you know what? What are the needs of other people? Because someone else has got my back. Now that reality doesn't and should not only exist in marriage. Paul would argue that that reality should exist in the church. That when we walk in this place, we absolutely know I'm part of a community and these people have got my back. These people are for me. These people are behind me. They're cheering me on. They're investing in me. And I know that they've got my interests at heart. I've not got to fight for something here. I'm free from all that fighting to protect number one. And actually, I can begin to look to the needs of others, and I can invest and be interested in other people as well. It's a staggering, freeing thing when it happens. And if it happened to us as a church, we would become the most alive community that London has ever seen. We absolutely would. People would look in on this and go, what is this? This is the relationship I'm looking for. We're all looking for a relationship. Why? Because it's all about relationship. It's written into the fabric of creation since God made it all happen. And so we're all after relationship. And when people see relationship thriving, they're going to look in on this and go, oh, here it is. And now I don't have to fight for myself anymore because somebody else is going to look out for my interests too. And we build a beautiful community that shines in London. What's the next thing that Paul begins to teach us, even in this passage, is this: intimacy. Intimacy. It's interesting, isn't it, that when Paul talks about Timothy and Epaphroditus, he talks about them. He talks about Timothy as his son. He names himself as Timothy's father. He's not biologically, but he knows he's brought into a family, a relationship. That in pursuit of Jesus, we are brought into a family. We don't just individually pursue God and we're thankful for that, and if everyone else wants to come along, okay. When we pursue God, we are brought into his family. We are made sons and daughters of the King. We are co-heirs of an eternal kingdom with Jesus. We are part of his family. And so Paul refers to Timothy as his son. He refers to Epaphroditus as his brother. There's an intimacy that Paul chooses and goes after. An intimacy. Some of you will know that phrase to describe intimacy is, into me you see. That's what intimacy is. Into me you see. When we want to explore and understand intimacy, there's a sense in which I really know somebody. I see into them. It's not like a surface thing. I don't walk in and go, hey, it's been a great week. Woohoo, everything's wonderful. And there's this smiley veneer on my face, which is just like, that's how it is. And I never let anyone into the fact that actually I had a sleepless night. And and Sam's just had chicken pox and it's been really awful. I can just choose to project something that is a fake and a lie. But if I go after intimacy, I become real. Dare I say, I even become vulnerable. It's easier to become vulnerable when you know somebody's got your interests at heart. So if we get that right, vulnerability can begin to grow. And in vulnerability, you begin to say, actually, this is how it really is. I don't want to lie to you, or I don't want to just cover something up. I don't want to just present myself as some perfect thing. This is who I am, and this is who I really am. And that begins to provoke intimacy. Intimacy develops authentic relationships. It takes time, it takes honor, it takes care. It takes the kind of people who will be committed to investing and into the interests of others. And as we grow in intimacy, another thing that Paul points to is involvement. He talks to Timothy and Epaphroditus as those who get involved, those who get stuck in, who make the difference, who are part of it. He says that, look at Timothy. He's proved himself by the way in which he's served with me. Epaphroditus, you sent him to me, and he's done all that you asked him to do. He's served, he's slogged his guts out, even to the point where he nearly died. Thank goodness he didn't die, Paul says. Such was the commitment of Epaphroditus to get involved. Relationship is cultivated with involvement because you start to own things in a different way. Last weekend, I went off to do the Yorkshire 3 Peaks, which is when you basically walk a marathon And in the marathon is climbing the 3 highest peaks in the Yorkshire Dales. And so I went off. It was a charity fundraiser. And, to be honest, I was dreading slightly going into it. I love the odd adventure. I always try and set myself every year. I try and set myself some sort of challenge that's going to push me, that's going to push my boundaries, push my limits. And this time I thought I've taken on too much because I've done no training and I'm exhausted and this is just not going to happen. I'm going to hold everyone back. And we went with a team of about 30. And amazingly, we got through the challenge. Every single one of the 30 finished the challenge. We completed it just under 12 hours, which was our aim. And we'd been walking for 12 hours. And at the end, you would have thought that we were like tight family, that every one of us knew each other really well. The high fives going on like, woohoo, we've done it, come on. Everyone cheering one another on as we all came in past the end line, and the kind of hugs and embraces and the sense of relationship and being in it together and making something out. And everyone going, oh, do you know what? I'm coming back next year. What are we going to do next year? Let's do something next year. And you would have thought, everyone looking on would have thought, these guys have known each other since they were 0. Now, some of them had known each other a little bit, but some of them had never met each other at all. So what happened in 12 hours? Why had there been a fast track to engagement and relationship within 12 hours? Because we'd got stuck in and involved in something together. We'd gone on the adventure together. We'd called one another on. We'd encouraged one another when tears started to flow, when the pain of seeing that the peak wasn't where you thought it was another whole level. In those moments where you call one another on, you're involved, you're in it together, you can't leave anyone behind, you're going at this thing. And as a result of the involvement, relationship starts to get going. And so for Paul, relationship kicks off because Timothy and Epaphroditus, they're fully involved in Paul's mission to plant churches. And he knows that they are all in. They are absolutely all in. There's nothing being held back because planting a church in the first century was not an easy deal. In fact, it was a life or death deal. So Paul knew Timothy, he is all in. Epaphroditus, he is all in. He is fully involved. One of our greatest dangers sitting here this morning is that we're not involved. One of the challenges for us is we stand on the legacy of what Paul built. Churches began and grew, and here we are, sitting in a church together. We, the church, sitting together. But very few of us have had to fight for this. We just came and watched it. Very few of us have had to think, do you know what, it's life or death whether I go to church this morning or not. For us, the reality is, it's more like, going to church is more about a coffee and a croissant, hanging out, catching up with a few people. That's the reality, isn't it? It is for me. I know it's the reality. But there's a call to us here to get fully involved, to be absolutely in it, not to be watching from the sidelines, but to be in the game, making the thing happen. To be saying, do you know what, I'm here. Why? Why am I here? Why am I getting involved? Why am I coming along to things? Why am I serving on things? Why am I part of the welcome team or getting involved and running a connect group? Why am I involved in this stuff? Why would I step in? Why would I not just observe and watch what other people seem to do better than I can? Well, if you do that, you will short circuit the depths of a relationship you can go to with others and with God. We need to reclaim it and fight for this kind of relationship in this church. So here it is. As we go into it, we develop relationships, and as a church, we need to invest in one another. We need to go after each other's interests, be part of it, be involved in it, develop intimacy together, and establish full involvement wherever we're able to do that. And that's not always easy, but there is a choice to be made in it. There's a choice to be made in it. And I guarantee you that as you engage in these areas that seem to be rife in Paul's life, that your relationships will become more authentic. Your relationships with one another will go deeper. And your relationship with God will go deeper. Because those two areas of relationship cannot be separated. We live in this world that is hugely individualistic. It's all about the I, isn't it? The I player. I can choose when I want to watch, how I want to do it. It's all serving me. The iPhone, the iPad, the I this, the I that. You see, I everything. And it's driving at all of us remaining individual, looking for our own needs, our own choices, our own decisions. Not buying into we, us, our. And so Paul calls us up to I relationships today. I relationships, ones that choose to invest in the interests of others, in great intimacy, in deep involvement. And as we go after those I relationships, you will discover the purpose of your life. Why? because it's all about relationship. And as you engage in the depth of relationship with one another and with God, you will begin to discover what his call over your life is. It starts with the person in front of you. It starts with a relationship. And as you explore relationship with him and with others, and as you invest in that and make choices for that, he will begin to speak over you, the callings of your life. Because the callings of your life will be connected to relationship. Your engagement with a certain people group, your engagement with a certain job. It's all to do with relationship. It starts and begins and ends in relationship. It's all about relationship. That's where you'll discover your purpose, where you'll walk into your purpose. So choose relationship. Go after relationship. And if we could manage to do that here in this church and in the church all over this city, can you imagine what we might demonstrate to the world around us? Because it's all about relationship.
I'm Bear Grylls. My favourite way to start the day, the Bible in 1 year. That's how wild I am.
Find out more at BibleIn1year.org or download the Bible in 1 Year app.